I end up going down to Elizabethtown, Kentucky with Mike Vanderschnick, our videographer, and we spend 3 days down there talking to Mitchell's widow, talking to his parents.
Welcome to Tales from the Tundra, a weekly show that captures one team's history told through the eyes of the fan. My name is Ben, and on today's episode, I am sitting down with none other than Wes Hodkiewicz. Wes is a senior writer for the Packers, and during our conversation, we talk about his career path to becoming a writer for the Packers, what it's like to work for the Packers. We talk about some nerd stuff and so much more. This is episode 7 of Tales from the Tundra with Wes Hodkiewicz. One thing I love about this show is learning how someone becomes a Packers fan. Everyone's story is a bit unique on how they become such a fan of this team. However, Wes and I start this conversation talking about something else that I love, which is Rustique Pizzeria.
Rustique's my place. Like, especially during COVID, they were one of the spots that you could like drive up and they bring your pizza out, which is very important because with that thin crust, pizza, if you got to go too far, it's going to be hard to keep that thing warm.
Even more importantly is the pesto fries, man.
Absolutely.
Like, if you're taking those to go, you cannot get the pesto fries the same way.
Air fryer though. Air fryers are huge for pesto fries. If you ever run into a situation where you just got too many pesto fries and no one's going to eat it all, air fryer.
I don't know that exists in my household, man.
Oh, okay,
we always joke that
sure.
Rustique is like, we go there for the pesto fries and the pizza's the secondary benefit.
Yeah.
We crush the pesto fries right off the bat, and then we go.
Dude, if Rustique ever wants to sponsor me, like their wings, their pesto fries, they actually have a great Friday fish fry too. Their perch is great.
Okay.
Everyone goes for the pizza, but when you live that close to it, you sometimes branch out a little bit more. Their Colonel, their chicken sandwich is really good. I think at this point, dude, I've eaten everything on the menu.
It sounds like you're giving some good recommendations.
And I think I've had every pizza that I think every pizza they have, I've at least tried.
Interesting. That's wild. That is what
Waumea, Wisconsin.
Yeah. I didn't know if you would be a huge pizza guy because I know you don't like raw cheese.
I'm a walking contradiction, bro. I've always said this. I don't like raw cheese. Like, I don't like
the cold cheese.
Just like fresh cold cheese.
Yeah.
I don't eat. But I like pizza. So like, if I can't really, but see, this is where I'm a contradiction because the San Mateo at Rustique is my favorite pizza, and that has goat cheese on it. So it's like, it doesn't.
But it's kind of hot, right? So it's kind of,
And it got prosciutto and basil, and it's just fresh, and it's just. I don't just like, I won't go to like Little Caesars and crush like a cheese pizza, but if it's something like that's sort of
good quality,
eclectic, artesian, whatever you want to call it, like I'm good with that.
So you grew up in the area. Were you like a Packers fan all the way growing up? I know you're a big Sting guy because I was a big Sting guy as well, and that was another thing on social media. I was like, man, Wes and I might have had the same childhood because you had posted that picture on Instagram of you with your Sting, the NWO paint.
I did that back-to-back Halloweens.
And I went as a kid with the traditional, and I was pissed because my mom could not do the lines right. And so it looked like I had just a bunch of lines on my face. And I was like, no one's going to know I'm Sting. But when I saw you post it, I was like, dude, Wes and I might have lived the same childhood. So I appreciate going back to the point, were you a Packers fan like growing up, or was it something that kind of bloomed a little bit later on for you?
So it's funny, you can't see this where we are right now, but I'm a rather diminutive human being. I'm very small, not the smallest, but I'm 5'8", like 100 and nothing. Like, so I wasn't a big. I played flag football as I was growing up, but like, dude, I was so far ahead of my time as far as understanding the limits. Once we switched from flag to like actual tackle football at Bayview Middle School, I'm like, I'm out. Like, I know I'm going to get hurt. I am not good at this. So I always was a Packer fan, but I actually was always more of a Brewer fan growing up, even though the Brewers were really bad, because I related more with baseball. My grandfather was a big Brewers fan. He was a big Braves fan, actually, and then the Brewers. So, but that being said, where it all came full circle for me was Super Bowl 31 was huge. That was a huge moment for everybody. I was like everybody my age where we were just frustrated and ticked off that they couldn't get past the Cowboys. And then finally 96 comes around. So that really buoyed me in my fandom. And then honest to God, fantasy football, like, cause more than anything, I've always been a stats kind of nerd.
Mm-hmm.
I love numbers. I love crunching numbers. I love drawing, basically making arguments and drawing conclusions and hypotheses and everything with numbers. So once fantasy football got kicked up and you started tracking touchdowns, you start tracking yards, and it just gets, more and more. Football is the perfect sport for that. So, to some extent, I've always been a big football fan. I'm like every other Green Bay kid. My mom has the Halloween photos of me and the Brett Favre, paraphernalia and everything. So the helmet, whatnot. So, but yeah, and I've always enjoyed writing. I've always enjoyed. I remember Super Bowl 31. I had a little recorder because nowadays kids, they can just go on YouTube or they can go on Twitter. They can watch all this stuff over and over again. But like back then, it was like, man, am I going to get a recording of this? So like trying to record the TV broadcast and trying to record, Max McGee and Jim Irwin and everybody and I, because I loved radio as well. So all that stuff, the media side of things that surrounded professional football and in Little Green Bay, Wisconsin was always something I was really drawn to.
What was that? What was the vibe like in Green Bay? That's probably a stupid question, but what was the atmosphere like in Green Bay once they finally got over that hump? Because you're kind of at that prime age of really taking it all in.
Yeah.
And your parents, I would assume, are probably bigger Packer fans because they're from there.
My parents are massive Packer fans. Yeah.
So what was that like to finally get over that hump and experience that, especially with them if they've been waiting for it?
It's cool. And I think you're probably in the same boat too. If you have family or friends, or in this case, parents and elders, my uncles, my grandfather, them giving you that tutorial on the 29 years between the two Super Bowls and just the struggles that were encountered with that. And my dad telling me some of the stories in the 80s of going to games and how things were at times, it gave me a good appreciation from day one about what this is and what this team means to our community. I'll tell you what, my grandfather, Hank, God rest his soul, he was probably the biggest Packer fan I knew out of anybody. And he's one of the quintessential grandparents we all had who would, go to City Stadium and see a game and things like that. And then when the referendum happened for trying to get the new stadium and the renovations, he was one of those guys that was sitting there saying, like, we absolutely have to push this through. Like, this community needs this. These people need this. And it's so funny now for people that are younger that don't understand just how close that vote really was and how important Bob Harlan was to that and how important really the Packers Super Bowl was to that and making sure that this team is here for the long term. Those are the type of things that I carry with me because my grandfather, unfortunately, didn't live long. He lived long enough to see me at the newspaper when I was at the Green Bay Press-Gazette. He didn't actually live long enough for me to see me with the Packers. But like that kind of small thing that he trumpeted for, well, then lo and behold, his grandson ends up working for them, right? So like I think that's a cool thing with his story, a dairy farmer from Pulaski, Wisconsin, that kind of had that foresight of what this team means to the community, and then his grandson ends up working for him. So, I think that 96 run and everything that came after it and the characters that were a part of that thing, when you think of Leroy Butler and now getting a chance to know Leroy and just the type of personality he is and just the real ambassador for Packers football that he's become, I think that's the stuff that legends are made of.
It seems like every Super Bowl year you have that kind of special set of characters. We saw that in 2010. You had that Woodson really coming over the top, and BJ Raji kind of being like that goofball character on the team. And it seems like every one of those special teams has that wide variety. So it's really cool that you I don't know, kind of take that perspective every day with you into work. Now, my wife's from Green Bay. I am not from Green Bay, but my wife's from Green Bay, and I still go over to Lambeau Field all the time, and I'm like, man, it's so cool that we live so close. And for my wife, it's just kind of like, it's always kind of in the backyard. I would imagine because of your upbringing in that you understand how special it is to be at Lambeau Field or be close to Lambeau Field like we are here.
Yeah, I don't give myself credit for a lot. I'm pretty self-deprecating, but I will say I mean this. Like I would never say that there's no one in this building that this job means more to than me. I'm sure there are more people like that, but I put myself in the top upper echelon of that. Like I've never, ever, ever, and I've said this on other podcasts, like I've never taken for granted what this job is and what it meant. And I worked my butt off to get here. Like I made a lot of sacrifices to be in this spot. But that being said, like driving down, since the day I could drive, dude, like when I was 16 years old, going to Bay Park Theater to like go watch a movie, like it never was lost on me that, oh yeah, That's an NFL stadium right there, and there's 30 of those things in the country, and we happen to have one in a town of 100,000 people, maybe 250,000 as far as the whole metro area. It's the coolest thing in the world. And now that I've been able to kind of travel, like I never traveled much as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
So like, but with the job, obviously you go to all these cities, and now as far as the active stadiums, there's only 2 that I haven't covered a game at, and only 1 that I haven't actually been to, which is NRG in Houston. And then when you see how these stadiums are constructed and just the for a lack of a better term, monstrosity that they're becoming, like these cathedrals, but like these billion-dollar entities, like you get a real good appreciation for what it means to have this in this community. So that as long as I do this for, as long as they'll have me, like I've never lost sight of just exactly how rare this opportunity is, especially for someone that grew up here and never really had to leave. I went to college here, went to high school here, had my first job at the Press Gazette here, and then now punch the clock here every day.
Well, I think that's a great mindset to have. And one thing I always tell myself is like, man, this is someone's bucket list to be here, and I can be here every day if I want to. And I think that's a great thing. You mentioned that you've been to 30 of the 30. Well, you've been to
29 of the 30.
You've been to 29 of the 30. Oh, yeah, I suppose there's not 31 other stadiums because the Jets and Giants.
They share it.
Been to 29 of the 30.
And then LA.
Out of those, which is your favorite and least favorite that you've been to?
Okay. And this is not counting the wonderful Lambeau Field, right? This is
like, yeah. We're taking Lambeau Field because
that's
going to be top
of the list. The best.
Of course.
My favorite stadium, man, there's a couple, but I want to give you one. I absolutely love and admire everything that AT&T Stadium is, because I think it's the perfect balance between what the NFL has become, and obviously everybody knows the screen and everything, but it's also actually a really fun place to watch a football game. Now the Packers have won a lot of games there, so that's helped. But every time I go to AT&T Stadium is really special. I like Lumen Field in Seattle. This year was very, very different because the amount of Packer fans that were there and the vibes. Dude, if you would have told me when the Packers lost the NFC Championship game in 2014, 2015 season, if you would have ever told me, dude, that field would have Go Pack Go chants starting in the first quarter, I don't care if it was 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road, I could have never envisioned that, because that day when they played the Seahawks back in what technically would be 15, that was the loudest I've ever heard at NFL Stadium. And I love that stadium. I think it's a cool atmosphere. I think it's a neat place to watch a football game. My least favorite stadium is FedEx Field, and I don't think I'm in the minority there. I think that a lot of people are saying that. Unfortunately, I think there's a lot of change that's going to be happening there with the change in ownership with the Commanders. But that stadium is the worst view of a press box. They stick you in one of the end zones. I'll never forget. I forget exactly which game it was. Maybe it was 2018. It was one where there was some rain involved with it, and the press box was actually leaking. So they had buckets out catching the water that was coming through the ceiling in different areas.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, and then it's one of the, for me historically, it's been one of the worst food kind of press box things. And it's not a great atmosphere. I think it only fits maybe 58 or 56,000. So like, yeah, that's probably easily my least favorite stadium. But I mean, there's more good ones than there are bad. This is a massive league and a massive sport. But yeah, those are definitely the ones that kind of come to mind the quickest.
I do have to ask, as we're talking about stadiums, something popped up. What was going on with this Eagles fan?
Oh, bro.
What's the story here? This drunk lady just finds her way into the media box?
She wasn't in there, thank God.
Okay.
But Eagles, so here's what's really interesting about CenturyLink, and this is my third time at CenturyLink, and I remember this from like Soldier Field a little bit, because Soldier Field, the way the press box is, the fans are kind of close. Not to the point that they're staring at you, but if they bang on the walls, you're hearing all that in the press box. CenturyLink, I think, is the only stadium I've come across where if you're sitting in your spot, like here I'm at the lab, I'm at the computer, the fans are directly in front of you. There's glass there, but they're right there.
Wow.
So the Packers brass is right there. Robert Saleh, who was acting as a consultant at that time, is also there. So it's the first row is all our beat core, and then it's like Saleh and like some of the other dignitaries, and then the row next past that is the PR staff, my department, and then it was Mark Murphy and Brian Gutekunst and some of the other brass there. So it took them probably a couple alcoholic beverages and also a couple quarters to realize everybody that was behind them. And there was this young, wonderful lady that'll be the only thing I'll say about her, that started getting more and more demonstrative and more aggressive. And it went from insults about some of the personnel that were there, and then the gentleman she was with were hurling some insults as well.
Wow.
To, unfortunately, Rob Domofsky is like right there, like as close as I am to the screen to her, basically, maybe a little bit over to the side. And then she starts making bald jokes. And if you want to get the full description of that, you can go to Matt Schneidman's Twitter account and find them. I'm not going to recount that.
Yeah, no, definitely don't need to.
But Rob finally had enough. God bless him. I don't necessarily blame him. And I even tweeted afterwards too. It was, and I mean this wholeheartedly. I will say this. I mean, I've covered the league now for 12 years. It was probably one of the more unprofessional settings that I feel I've worked in.
Sure.
I understand their fans. I understand their right to all that. It would have been nice if somebody from, whether it's the Eagles or their staff or security, would have done something about it. But unfortunately, Rob ended up having to be the brunt of that. So Schneidman obviously took to Twitter with that. So it ended up becoming a legend and lore. But yeah, and then it was just a disappointing thing all around. But it gives you an idea. I mean, this is what it's like when you go to Philly. I mean, that's just the type of atmosphere you're going to get.
I guess so. That's wild. Wow. Yeah, I had to ask you about that because I saw a little bit. I don't go on Twitter a ton, but I was on there enough at that point.
That one gained a lot of traction. It gained a lot of traction.
I was like, I have to ask this. So you start at the Press Gazette, and were you working like nights? I think is what I read.
Yeah. So I had the worst college life of, I think, anybody that's ever gone to college. I started working at the Press Gazette when I was 18. My first shift at the Press Gazette was before I even took a college course. There's a long story to that. I've talked with people about this in the past too, but it goes back to just the idea of when you have an opportunity, trying to seize it. And the Press Gazette, I had some connections into there. They had their part-time score taker for prep calls. He quit a week before the prep season in the fall. And if you know anything about that era, you're taking calls for all the sports, you're getting the box scores, you're writing everything up. And it sounded like a cool job. And I had some connections over there. So it worked out that I could get my foot in the door with it. So while I was going through college, so I'd get up, I had my first class usually like 8 a.m. And by the time 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock came around, I would go to the Press Gazette and I'd work there until like between 11 and midnight, depending on the day. Because at that time, we still were on deadlines, heavy print deadlines, 10:30 during, was it 11 o'clock during the week and 10:30 on Saturdays, I think it was. And I was the one that was writing up those with our other copy editors, writing those things up, getting them in the paper every day. And I did that for 3 years. And then my last year, it was getting kind of hard on me, hard on my girlfriend. Like, I almost moved out, but then they switched me to a part-time writer role instead, and they got other people to take the phone calls. And then that ended up becoming kind of my inroad into the writing. So I wrote the entire time there. My first byline was when I was 18 years old. We're not saying it was good, but like I wrote from day one. But then once I got to my senior year of college, I was able to write, and I didn't have to worry about scores. So I did preps. Basically anything that wasn't Packers, I did. And then in 2010, I started helping out with the draft, and I was basically a part-time Packers guy for 2 years. And then in 2012, Kareem Copeland, who's at the Washington Post now, he went down to Indianapolis with his girlfriend, now wife, and she got a job in TV down there. So he followed her down there. The number 3 job opened up for the Packers and the number 3 beat writer role. And I was fortunate enough, they hired me into it. So Domofsky and then Pete Doherty were my colleagues. Mike Vandermoss was my boss. And
wow, that
started the Packers thing, 24 years old.
Hey, it's Ben. Sorry to jump in. I wanted to announce last week's giveaway winner. Thank you to everyone who took the time to enter into the giveaway. Thanks to everyone who listened, who supported in any way possible, whether you're sharing the reels, sharing the podcast, anything like that. I appreciate you all immensely. I also want to say thank you to Nicolay Law for making these giveaways possible all year long. Without them, I would not be able to do this. So huge shout out to Nicolay Law. If you are injured, get Nicolay. Let's draw this week's winner. We will go this one. This week, winner is Bailey. Congratulations, Bailey. Let's take a look and see what you won. Bailey, you have won yourself. Ooh, that was close. Craig Newsom signed 8x10. Congratulations, Bailey. Once again, thank you to all for all your support. Let's get back to our episode with Wes. And over the years now, you've wrote a lot of great stories. I read that.
I don't know about a lot, but I appreciate that.
Yeah, I can't write to save my life, so I will say you write a lot of good stories. And I read that that's kind of what your favorite thing is of your job, is to be able to tell these incredible stories. As you reflect on your career, focusing more on the pack when your time with the Packers, I guess, because I don't know exactly what you wrote with the Press Gazette, but what are some of your, when you think of your favorite stories over the last 12, 13 years, what are you thinking of when that comes to your mind?
Yeah, I've given, I'll give you a couple answers to that, because I don't want to just give my boilerplate response. But if anyone ever asks me what my favorite story is, from that day I wrote it to whenever I wrap up here with the Packers and whenever I stop writing, it's going to be my Mitchell Henry feature. So if people aren't familiar with that, Mitchell Henry was an undrafted free agent the Packers signed in 2014. And the lights just went off at Lambeau, so it's going to get dark in here now. I apologize.
No, you're good. It looks very
it's like dim. We get serious, so it gets dark and dim in here now. So Mitchell was an awesome human being, an awesome dude. And I had talked to a scout that kind of trying to get a feel for the draft class, which undrafted free agents potentially could be someone the Packers could make the team, and I'd heard really good things about Mitchell. So, you do this every year. The beat writers now do the same thing. You kind of project, the Brenton Cox Juniors of the world, who are going to be the guys that are going to eventually try to make a roster spot. Mm-hmm. So I got to know Mitchell a little bit through that process. He was a very nice, young, somewhat introverted, but very kind and very thoughtful dude. And he's from Elizabethtown, Kentucky. He was a catfisherman. Like, he loved to catfish. And basically at the end of his rookie camp, I had said to him, like, hey, dude, you make the 53-man roster. I'm going to go down to Kentucky with you. I'm going to go catfishing. I want to see what this is all about. Because I'm thinking of the noodling stuff. I'm talking like sticking your hand into the muck and then hope you don't lose a finger, right? Like that kind of stuff. So a lot of stuff happens. Mitchell doesn't make the team. He gets claimed by Denver. He ends up going to the Broncos during that season, spends part of it with them, comes back to the Packers. And unfortunately, a couple years later, we find out about his cancer diagnosis. Mm-hmm. And he unfortunately in 2017 passes away. So not to fast forward through all this, but it ties into the Insider Inbox column, because somebody had asked me in that, are there any stories that you regret not telling? Any stories you never did, never executed that you wish you would have told? And I said, it's the Mitchell Henry story. And I recounted the joke, and I knew his brother Ben really well. And I think I'd had this conversation with Ben before too. And his dad somebody forwarded it to his dad, Terry. And Terry sent me a message and he said, hey, listen, I have not been catfishing since Mitchell died, but I know he would want me to invite you down here to do it. So after the 2019 draft, this all happened during the 2019 season or off season. After the draft, Packers draft Rashawn Gary, I end up going down to Elizabethtown, Kentucky, with Mike Vanderschnick, our videographer, and we spend 3 days down there talking to Mitchell's widow, talking to his parents, and do this whole package, It's still the longest story I ever wrote. It was 6,200 words. Wow. And the response to it was incredible. Getting a chance to meet his parents, Terry and Leslie. Leslie liked one of my Instagram stories the other day too of my son. Wonderful, salt of the earth people. His wife, his widow, Madison. I mean, just amazing people. So that story takes on a little bit added meaning to me too, because we lost Snick last month. He passed away as well, did some incredible work for us for a number of years and was one of the guys that helped me get my foot in here at the Packers. So that is it's not a really probably a very big, it's not an upper, to tell all that, right. But it's when you ask me about what I do and what means the most to me, it's stories like that mean the most. But there's so many cool, incredible like happy stories I've told too. The Aaron Jones one last year with his bike kid is high up there for me. Shoot, doing the Bo Melton story in October where Max, his little brother, gets drafted.
Great story.
They get a chance to play each other, like those type of things. And then this is another one. When we did the travel essay story with Evan Siegel last year, in what ended up being Red Batty's last year as equipment manager here. Before he retired. And I didn't know that at the time when we did the whole piece, but that was a 3-month process of getting the photos together and getting information from Red and his staff about what their process is and being able to kind of pull back the curtain a little bit about how a football team in the National Football League travels, all these people and who's involved in it, making sure that you have the backup, helmets for communicating on defense and in the practice squad uniforms and all the things that you cannot forget when you're traveling across the country with a football team. All that stuff was really cool to tell too. So the older I get and the more stories we tell, it seems like I start kind of somewhat forgetting like my favorites, but you asked me that question.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that because that's those are, I know you said they're not the high stories, but I feel like a lot of times those are the stories that stick with people, and those are the ones that need to be told because so many people can relate to those stories.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you were able to capture that, and I'm sure it meant a lot to everyone involved.
Yeah, and I'm a feeler. I'm a very emotional person. Basically, every type of music I listen to is like emotionally driven, I think you would say. Like I've always been that way. And I grew up a very sensitive kid, and I had some people in my life, not my parents or anybody, but I had people that I grew up with that were kind of trying to beat that out of me and not have that. And it's like, no, that's absolutely who I am.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, and the older I get, it was harder when you're in the late 90s and early 2000s with that sort of outlook. But I think people have gotten a lot more appreciative of it now. And for me, what I try to do, and obviously we got to do the day-to-day coverage. If somebody's somebody's injured and Christian Watson's out, how are they going to respond to it? We have to write those stories. You have to write the stories about Jordan Love and what we're going to do and how you're going to bounce back from whatever. There are stories everybody has to touch on. But when I try to write long forms, when I try to write profiles, I try to make people feel things because that's, if I don't feel something, whether it's a story, whether it's music, whether it's a movie, if I'm not connected to it, like I need to be able to get that in order to really get the full meaning of something out of it. So
you mentioned that you're good with emotions. Did you find that once you had your son, it amplified even more? Because I found that I'm a huge sap now that I have my son. Dude, I was watching the Super Bowl and there's a Google Pixel ad. Yeah. I don't know if you saw that one. And I'm like tearing up during the Super Bowl. And I'm like, I'm supposed to be eating way too much junk food and trashing the Chiefs right now, not like tearing up about Google Pixel in this interview about this dad. Yeah, dude. Yeah. And my wife's just kind of giving me grief, and I'm just like, I'm just a sap now. So did you find that the same way when you had your son?
Yeah. I won't lie to you. I had the last time I cried at a movie, it was before Killian, my son. The last time I cried at a movie was Up, which I think is 2011. That whole montage where it's them together and they're trying, it's their whole life and, and going through and not being able to have a child. And then they end up just doing their own thing together. And then she passes away. Dude, I was a freaking wreck in the theater.
And that's at the start of the movie too. And then you got to sit in it. I
remember sitting there thinking to myself, I'm like, if this is what this 2-hour movie is, this is not what I signed up for. Okay. So I'd be lying to you if I told you like, hey, I wish I cried more now. But that being said, yeah, I think once you become a parent, it changes your outlook on life. It definitely changes your outlook on if you see a small child go through something. It absolutely, you just think, in my case, trying to push anything, but I'm like, I thank God that it's like my son is good, right? Yeah. Like, and not that the other kids aren't, but I mean, like, you take health for granted so much when you have it, right? Yep. And that is probably the biggest thing. So yeah, to that point, when Mitchell passed away and going down to Elizabethtown and being there with his parents and their son, he had a younger brother too, Ben, who's just the most awesome dude ever. And, they're such a tight knit family, but I don't care if you have one child or you have 10 kids. I can never imagine what it is like to lose one.
No.
And to have to bury your son and all that. And there's and the grace that they showed and the faith that they showed, and that was just so incredibly inspiring to me. So I think a lot of times when I do some of these things, it gives me an appreciation for what I have.
Mm-hmm.
And you definitely don't take it for granted.
I think that's I think that's such a great mindset. That's such a great reminder to have, because you're hitting the nail on the head there for sure. It's like I worry so much about my son on everything, checking on him on the monitor. He's 18 months now. Check on him every night, like throughout the night. I'm like, he hasn't really rolled anywhere in a minute. Is he okay? And it's like, he's fine. He's just, you
worry about them going on their stomach and everything.
Yeah, dude, it's just wild, and everything they do. Kind of lightening it up a little bit more here, I guess.
Yeah, like we're getting kind of heavy up in here, dude.
Yeah, my bad here. You mentioned the Insider. I read Insider from time to time. There are some interesting people that come in there.
That's a good way to put it.
So and I'm not going to put words in your mouth. I'll say stuff, you're not saying it. Some Packer fans are very, very obnoxious, and some of the worst people from a sports perspective to deal with. And this is not Wes saying this is me saying this. So as you're doing Insider, do you have to read every single entry, or do you get them filtered out for you ahead of time?
There might have been some maneuvering that I've done with Microsoft Outlook to
keywords filtered out.
You can filter out words and some email addresses and things like that to give away some secrets. There might be some things there, because it's there's only so much garbage you can sift through before you start to smell it. But that being said, I'm going to give you the positive side of this too. It is a blessing to have a platform, an insatiable desire for people to fill up a daily Q&A and a fan, like a team website, to have fans that engaged in your product. Again, I had this conversation with somebody earlier today when I went on vacation this past week. Before I left last Thursday, I deleted out, I think it was from the end of February. I think it was after Thanksgiving. We have an Insider Inbox subsection to our email, so it doesn't all filter through my email. I got one thing I can go to for all the questions. And I think it was just under 13,000 submissions we had from the end of November. So that ended up being just over 2 months. And I try to answer 20 questions a day, 25 a day, usually. And myself and Mike Spofford, my colleague, the editor of Packers.com, we alternate. Although this week he's having to do all of them. Sucks to be him. But I say that lovingly. But it's hard. And the thing, I have no issue. I get it, man. People are very passionate about their team. There's only two things I don't like: when it turns into personal attacks, and if you finish a question by saying, "You work for the team, there's no way you'll publish this," that drives me mad. Because it's okay, so if that's the case, why are you here?
Right.
So you can just insult me? And I always tell everybody this, whether you read Insider Inbox or not, whether you engage with our content or not, we are a free website. You are welcome to come on our site. Show me one other NFL team. Show me any beat around the country where two people are willing to take your questions 6 days a week and give you responses. You might not like them. You might not agree with them. We will hear you, and we're the only ones doing it. So
God bless you, Wes.
Well, there's nothing to be blessed here. It's my job. But that being said, it's that type of stuff that will drive you nuts at times, because it's we're trying to provide you a service here. You can take it, you can leave it, but this is what we are.
I was always curious on if there was anyone kind of starting the process of filtering that out, or if you and Spoff are the two lucky ones there, because I can only imagine some of the craziest comments and
we have our own processes too. We both handle it differently. Mike a lot of times will go through and find questions and then answer them, and he typically will read through all of them. When I finish my inbox and I'm off of it the next day, I do not read inbox that day. I read how people respond to it in Mike's column, but I don't go through inbox and read all the questions. I don't have enough time for that. I got to get other stuff done, and we just got done talking about long forms and profiles and stories. There has to be time to do those things.
Right.
So I can't just live in that Microsoft Outlook the entire time. I got to do other stuff. But that being said, Like it's those type of things that sometimes can drive you up a wall because, again, we're not taking your money. So we're here to listen, but just don't beat on us too much. Basically,
Yeah,
is the only thing. We're
you're
not being
human
honest.
beings. You're there answering questions.
Yeah.
On the flip side of that, though, I bet you get a lot of
Thank you.
usuals coming in.
Yes.
And
I appreciate you bringing that back around for me because we have some amazing readers. And the cool thing, we go around with these pep rallies with Packers everywhere.
Mhm.
So we'll go to all these cities. This year we did 6 of them because it's Mark's last year. We did more. And we will get people that will come up and say, I'm so-and-so from so-and-so. And it's like amazing. Like I finally get to meet you. Like I feel like I know you because of all the times you've interacted with us, all the questions you've asked. We have daily people that read every day that are understanding if their question gets answered. They understand if they doesn't get answered. Like, and that is the coolest thing about it because that is why I do what I do. Like it is that type of connection. And it doesn't say you always have to agree with me or you have to be best friends on everything, but it's people that show respect and have a passion for the team. That's what connects us all. Whether you do a podcast, whether you do a Q&A, whether you're on Instagram, whether you're on Twitter, what have you. When people show that type of passion for the team, that's what drives me to do what I do. So that is by far the coolest thing. Being for however many, let's say there's one person that just drives you up a wall, there's 8 people that every day remind you why you do it. So that's always fun.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with my page. I get some of the most obnoxious people, and I unlike yourself, I have the liberty. I can just block people if they get on my nerves.
We can't do that in inbox. You got to be creative about it. Yeah.
But I can just block people and never see them again. But I have such a good group of people that really make doing social media and what I do a lot more enjoyable. I will say that. So
I have a rule about this because I do block some people on Twitter. It ends up being a lot of opposing fans. I don't fight with people normally. I've gotten a little bit more curmudgeon-y as I've gotten older. If you don't follow me, I'm going to block you. Because you're wasting my time and you're eating up my mentions. Like there's no reason for you and I to interact if you don't follow me. Now, if you follow me and you have some issues, let's work through it. We'll talk about it, But it's like if you're just some nameless, faceless egg out there in the Twitter sphere, I got to move on. There was a dude I was getting into it with and I didn't block this guy. I was getting into it with a Lions fan after all the fiasco with Kirby Joseph.
They popped up out of nowhere this season. Out of nowhere.
Dude, this is why I had so much. This is how it all started because I had so much fun telling people, you guys were not some Packer fans, not all Packer fans. You guys were cheering for them last year. Why?
Yeah.
No, if your division rival has been terrible for 30 years, you just let them be terrible. Not saying that they are like they've all been terrible. But I'm just saying like when they've struggled, like you don't cheer for their success.
Yeah.
Like you think the Bears fans were cheering for the Packers' success in 1988? No way.
No
so
chance.
And so I ended up getting into it with this one fan, and it was so funny, dude, because he popped back in my mentions then. Like I think it was after something happened. I don't know. Maybe it was after they won the division or they beat. No, I think it was after they beat the Vikings. And he's like, "Yeah, what'd you think about that?" I'm like, "I legitimately have not thought about it since you and I were fighting at the beginning of December." Like, and that's not like, "Oh, I'm Wes Hodkiewicz. I'm all high and mighty." No, dude. There's like a million of those people out there that are yelling at you. How do you remember any of them?
Yeah. And what I found really odd about Lions fans this year is I made a video that got a lot of Lions fans mad, and I said it seems like Lions fans don't know how to win yet. Like they just they haven't figured it out because when the Vikings beat us or any other team really, when they beat us, my mentions don't change much.
Yeah.
I might get like 1 or 2 that'll come in and be like, "Oh, we got you," whatever. When the Lions beat us, I'm flooded with Lions fans just trash talking.
Yeah.
And I'm like, where were you guys 3 years ago? I've never seen you. And that got a lot of people mad that I said they don't know how to win.
The way I am, dude, like when you cover this is my 13th year I just wrapped up as far as covering the team. I told people this for so long. The Packers went, whatever it was 11-0 under LaFleur or 9, whatever it ended up being against the Bears. And I said, there will come a time where they're going to lose to the Bears. It's going to happen. I'm not going to live the rest of my life. Good Lord willing, I keep going on here. I'm not going to live the rest of my life without the Packers just always beating the Bears 98 games in a row. It's just not going to happen. When you can take a perspective on that, it's not just about 2024. It's about what happens in 25 and 26
Yeah.
and 27. Now the Lions win a Super Bowl this year. That's a big feather in their cap. But it's not easy to win in this league.
No.
And it's that understanding that everything can change in a given week. And I think I liken the Lions, not saying the Packer fans got like this, but I liken the Lions this season to a lot of what the Packers were in 2011, where it just seemed like they were a force that no one could stop. But then it just takes 60 minutes, right?
Right.
And that's what happened.
And, and that's, I talked about too, of like, you mentioned how hard it is to win in this league. And I said, the Lions are a prime example of that. They were dominating all season long until they weren't. And it was very kind of reminiscent of the 2011 Packers. And then an offense that was clicking on all cylinders all year long until they had a break. And then they came out sluggish, and that was the end of it. Yeah. So it is incredibly hard to win in this league. And dude, that's wild that the Lions fans checking back in weeks later. Did you check back in then after the divisional round and just be like, oh, how you doing, man?
I don't do that.
No,
it's like, I'm sure that dude was having the worst day ever at that point, but it's like, I don't care.
Leave that to like Matt Ramage, because Matt will follow up.
That's Matt's business.
Dude, he has like calendar reminders, I think. I don't know. He's got something going on.
Matt's turned that into like a Monopoly property now. That's like half of his. I'm kidding, but like, yeah, I mean, he embraces it, and good on Matt. I mean, everything. I love Ramage. I mean, everything he does, I just love. He's authentic, and he's just himself, and he makes eye jokes that I never feel comfortable laughing at.
Dude, yeah.
So I'm always just kind of like,
you got to lean into it. Just laugh at him, dude. I've gotten to know.
I can't laugh at people and that type of stuff. He's trying. I'm like.
I've gotten to the point now where I crack a little bit with him, because I know I've gotten to know him so well now over the years. Him and I actually met each other on Twitter way back in the day, 2009. Oh, really? We met each other on Twitter, and that's how we kind
the
of
real empathy of this thing.
Dude, yeah. And then we both just kind of kept in touch over the years and kind of started doing our own thing together. Him doing his thing, whatever. But yeah, you gotta kind of go with it, because he's a good sport with that. Hey, it's Ben. Wanted to give you this week's phrase of the week so you can enter in for your chance to win some great Packer prizes next week. This week's phrase of the week is quick trip, which, if you're new here and you don't know what to do with that, check out the link for the giveaway in the show notes or the comments. Find that link, fill out that form, and it's going to ask you for that phrase of the week or the Nicolay Law word of the week. And once again, it is quick trip. You might be wondering, why quick trip? Well, Russell Nicolay, who's the owner of Nicolay Law, he travels a lot for work, obviously. He's all over the place. He's all over in the Midwest. And he stops at Quick Trips a lot. If you follow him on any social media, which you should, he posts when he's at Quick Trip and makes a lot of posts involving Quick Trip. He's even at the gas pumps at Quick Trip. So they're very involved with one another. I felt like it was a fitting one. Huge thank you to Nicolay Law for making these giveaways possible all year long. Quick Trip, once again. Let's get back to our episode with Wes. So, this next question here is probably going to get lost on a lot of people, and I'm not sure you're ready to answer this question. It might be a little bit tough. Okay. With the Packers hosting the draft this year, this is a stupid question, but it's very appropriate and very important. If you had the number 1 pick overall in the draft, but rather than football players, you're drafting Pokemon.
Ooh!
Which Pokemon would you draft to set your franchise up for success?
Oh my god, dude!
And I might take Arceus off the table.
I was going to say,
he's a god. He's a god.
Yeah,
you can't.
Are we going to have the one that created everything? Is that the? Is that how
you got to take him off the table?
Oh my goodness, what a great question!
I feel like a lot of people are like, "All right, I'm done listening here."
No, I mean, you and I talked about this beforehand, so I got to be honest with you, right? Like I told you before we started the show, I used to play the video game.
Yep.
And Snorlax was always my guy. It was a powerful, albeit slow Pokemon. And we just got done hearing Howie Roseman and everybody talk about how you build the lines up. That's how you build a championship team. So for me, I think it probably would be Snorlax. I mean,
that'd be solid guard.
He is the combination of one of my all-time favorite Pokemon, one that I actually played with in the video game, and also has that cool factor too. Like, I think that's when you talk about trading card game and that's still one that a lot resonates with a lot of people. So
I like it. I think that's
Charizard's probably everybody's belle of the ball, right? But Charizard isn't a great VGC Pokemon. and it's not, having to go 2 stages in the TCG isn't exactly great.
That's
so
true.
I think I go Snorlax.
When I was thinking of it, I was like, I would maybe think Mewtwo, because he could bring some
See, that's
psychic
the other thing
ability
too.
in
I
here.
should have asked that. Are we doing just regular? Are we going to go legendary? Are we going mythical? Like,
Dude, that's yeah. I guess I didn't think that much about it, but I was just like,
if
hey,
you're doing that, then it's like, well, then maybe Groudon. Maybe Kyogre. I mean, those were the ones that dominated for a lot of years too. So.
See, this is probably what people signed up to listen for.
This is exactly what they wanted.
I advertised this as a Packers, but we're just hitting the Pokemon. If we would have recorded our 15 minutes of Pokemon conversation before this, people really would have been interested.
Yeah, they would have been like, "Oh, this is a great way to start the show." It's like when I Jimmy Christensen at all, like when I did his podcast a couple times.
Okay, yeah, I know
every
Jimmy.
Single time we do it, and then they would actually they get done talking about Packers, and Jimmy's like, "Okay, I got one MMA question." Because I'm a big MMA UFC fan, and then his co-host would always be sitting there like, "Oh God, It's like Wes we have to get that question in there." So, dude, you and I talked about this. Like, this is who we are, and you can't just always be all football all the time. Not saying you're always going to like it. Spofford talks about Brewers baseball all the time. I know nothing about the Brewers now.
Yeah, that's interesting because you said you grew up really being more of a Brewers fan.
Well, the 2011 NLCS happened, bro. So. That knocked I am the worst fan ever. I just quit. I always say this, when the Packers, if I would have been the head coach of the Packers in 2014, Mike McCarthy, when people talk about being resilient and bouncing back, that's not me. I would have just quit. So when the Brewers lost to the Cardinals, I crap you not, this is exactly how it went down. I was so invested in that team in 2008. And even in 2009 and 10, when they took a step back, in 2011 happens, my eggs were all in that basket, so that when the Brewers win the division, I think they had 96 wins that year, the Cardinals squeak in as the wild card, and Tony La Russa beats them in the NLCS, goes on to win the World Series, and then retires. That was it for me. It knocked everything out of me. I was gone. I never bounced back from that.
I know nothing about what you're talking about, if we're being honest.
Some Brewer fans out there will understand.
Yeah, some will. I get a lot of grief.
No.
I mentioned Cedar Crest ice cream, and I was like, dude, where's this been? And the amount of people are like, oh, I guess you're not a Brewers fan. Oh, you don't listen to Brewers? You don't watch if you, and I'm just like, sorry, take away my Wisconsin card. I'm so focused on Packers football that I don't have the mental energy.
You know what? Else. I will say this too. Like I mentioned earlier, 2012, I moved over to Packers, and that has just completely taken over my life. I get to some Bucks games, and I like watching the Bucks, especially during the COVID year and in 21 when they won the championship, when they're playing into June or whatever it was, or was it July? I forget how that season went. That was a lot of fun. But when training camp starts to when the playoffs end, it ends up being usually a 6-month run. It's so hard to have. I love Formula One too. Mm-hmm. And then it's as soon as training camp starts, it's hard to stick with it because there's just so much other stuff going on.
Well, especially with your work schedule has to be insane. I feel like you're always, it's 8:30 right now and you're at Lambeau Field. So that's gotta be insane.
I have such low confidence in my Wi-Fi at home though too. So that's another aspect of it. It's I've done some of these with Tom Grossi, and then I'm at home and I'm like, God, I look like I'm from a 1996 Windows desktop.
Well, I'm sorry to make you come into Lambeau Field to do
this.
No,
we were in town all day today, and I had some other stuff going on before this. So, but that it's what you sign up for. I took off 2 Thursdays ago. I took off, and I checked our basically our HR website where you file PTO and that, and it was the first time I had taken PTO since I think it was July 14th. So it's so hard to find days. Basically, if we're on a standard regular season week, Saturdays before home games, I basically am off. Those are great. Mm-hmm. But then if we're traveling, I'm flying out by noon usually. So noon or 11 or 1 o'clock. So, but that's what you sign up for. I got it easy compared to people I know that work in football and in other areas. I mean, mm-hmm. everybody has to, what you sign up for when you do this. So,
Have you found that working for the Packers has changed your perception as from a fan perspective? Does it feel more like a job now as
Yeah.
opposed to being a fan?
Yeah, it's hard to be a fan. It honestly is, and that's what's
Mhm.
always I find funny when people like try to call me a homer or whatever in inbox. And I mean, to some extent, I am. Like I have some huge issues with the NFL officiating right now that I've voiced very loudly on Twitter.
Do you worry about like repercussions of that
No,
since you're an
I
NFL
don't.
employee or
No.
no?
If they want to have a conversation about it, I would love to have a conversation
Okay.
with somebody. I one thing I've always said this. If a player's struggling or if things aren't going well, we're not necessarily going to have the headline on that. We're not necessarily going to, maybe talk about it the way that other outlets will talk about it. But I'm never going to lie to you. I'm never going to say something that I don't feel is true. There's 53 players on a roster,
Mm-hmm.
46, 48 on game days now. There's always stories to tell.
Mm-hmm.
There's always accurate stories to portray. It's just where you shine the light. And I feel like the NFL is the same way. I mean, I think I don't like the 17-game season. I don't like the 18-game regular season. I'm not going to tell you I like those just because I work for the NFL. Now,
Right.
in the same breath, I will tell you I was absolutely wrong about the number 7 seed. I did not want to expand the playoffs at all. And it's not because, the Packers won back-to-back years. No, the first round bye really does mean something now.
Mm-hmm.
There's an inherent advantage to being the number 1 seed in both of these conferences. If you
Mhm.
win the conference in the regular season, it's a huge advantage now. And the Super Wildcard weekend is really fun. It's
Yeah,
a
I would
cool
agree.
deal. Like, it's made the league better. I don't feel like the 17th game has made the league better. I don't feel like
No.
the 18th game has made the league better. And I think officiating, I don't take it up with the referees. I really don't, even though I'm critical of them at times. I feel like there's so much more we can do. And if you need evidence of that, watch the Philadelphia Eagles wildcard playoff game.
Yeah, I will say I thought it was interesting that how during the wild card game, Keyshawn Nixon didn't have maintained control of the ball, but yet during was it their NFC Championship game that he magically maintained possession of the ball, even though the Washington player came out of the pile with the ball.
Yep.
So I agree 100%. And if I'm not mistaken, NFL refs are not full-time employees
They're not.
with the NFL. So I think that's a pretty big miss.
I just think there's more we can do. The example I keep using is if Bob from Crivets, Wisconsin has access to the Sky Cam and can see what happened on that play with Keyshawn, how does the New York office not have that?
Yeah.
That's my issue. And here's the other thing. I've said this on a couple different platforms now, but Oren Burks, I'm not saying he did it maliciously, but he drove his helmet into Keyshawn's face mask.
Yeah.
Keyshawn fumbles. Keyshawn corrals the fumble. Keyshawn is not given credit for the corralling the fumble, and the possession is given to the Eagles. But yet an independent neurologist on the sideline says that Keyshawn needs to come speak with them because he took a helmet-to-helmet hit that was not called.
Yeah.
So you have all these things that have happened here, and I'm tired of – you have to play above officials. I understand that. I'm tired of that becoming the go-to boilerplate response. And my biggest issue of all is like when you go to the Super Bowl media availability and they had the press conference for Roger Goodell, and Roger continually every year talks about NFL officiating being outstanding. It's not outstanding. It's not bad, but it's not outstanding, and it can be better. And there's more the league can do to improve it.
Yeah, I'm curious with the amount of attention the Chiefs have kind of gotten with the eyes on the official. I wonder if they're going to do a little bit more this offseason. I know they talked about putting trackers in the balls to be able to.
That's something they're working on, and obviously they did the stuff in the preseason. They were checking out about the line to gain and potentially using different types of technology for that than the standard chain gang.
So hopefully we can see some more of that take, because we saw that last year with San Francisco in the playoff game too. Jordan, I feel like Jordan had that fourth down conversion, and they marked him short, and you can't there's nothing to review because it's a pile of bodies, and that's just how it goes.
Yeah.
So it still baffles me that we put that in the control of the refs. So I'm with you on that kind of ramp.
And I know I kind of went off on a huge tangent there, but the point being, with any type of the content that I do, I'm always going to give you my perspective. Mm-hmm. I'm not just going to say something that is inherently false. When Mike McCarthy, things weren't going great in 2018, we had to tell those stories. Now, the difference is with our coverage is we're going to tell you, hey, this is what the coach is saying about it. This is what Aaron Rodgers is saying about it. We're not going to opine on, okay, well, this is what the Packers need to do. I don't know what the Packers need to do. And I think one of the things that's been kind of a challenge in this era is everybody on social media, and some people, not everybody, but some pundits out there feel like they have the answers to all these things. We don't have the answers.
Mm-hmm.
You have to see how it goes on the field, and that's how you ultimately judge the product.
Yep. I agree. I've kept you a long time here, so I'm gonna ask you some.
Ramage get me for 2 hours, so
that's
whatever.
What I saw. Well, he's rambling Matt Ramage, man. That's what
I
he
rambled
does.
a lot though too.
Yeah, that's good though. I feel like you make someone like my job pretty easy because I can ask a question, you give like really good in-depth answers, and
3.5 minutes later, I stop talking.
I don't have to like pull. It's not like pulling teeth to get stuff out of you. So,
yeah.
Kind of some random rapid fire questions here. All your years covering the Packers, who's like your favorite player you've gotten to interact with or gotten to know over the years?
Okay, so the answer to this is Mercedes Lewis. It can't be anybody else than Mercedes because he actually ended up becoming a friend of mine. And I don't say that like, oh, I'm friends with Mercedes Lewis, but like him and I just had so many common interests. He's a huge UFC fan. And dude, I'm telling you, man, like any other kind of niche thing, you know how you and I were kind of bonding about Pokemon earlier? If you can find niche hobbies and you find somebody else that cares just as much about those niche hobbies, you like there's like a brotherhood, a bond that is formed that cannot be broken.
Yeah.
And there's just so few people in my life that can go tit for tat with me on MMA that is amazing. So and that was another thing when you're talking about stories. I knew Mercedes. I covered him for a couple of years. COVID happens. I actually ended up becoming better friends with him during COVID. I did a big takeout on him going into the 2021 divisional playoff game against San Francisco. On his story, his mom's story, being raised by a single mother that was out on her own as a teenager, trying to support him and his siblings, and just an incredible background for him now to be in a position where he's played 19 years in the NFL, most games played by a tight end, insane. But yeah, I mean, absolutely Mercedes. I think Kenny Clark, Kenny knows this. It's almost probably uncomfortable how much I enjoy Kenny Clark. He's
such a great guy, though. I mean, really,
he's salt of the earth. I mean, like, it's just incredible. And like, again, another guy that a lot of times, like, if there's guys that I'm really got close with, it's always based on probably stories that I wrote on them. And getting a chance to know Kenny and his story, and if you don't know, if you're not familiar with it, his dad gets incarcerated when he's 9 years old. His mother is an absolute saint. Keeps the family together, works double shifts in her job to keep a house, keep a roof over their head. And then Kenny, before the 2023 season, finds out his dad is going to get, pardoned and is able to get out after 19 years. He was there at Soldier Field to watch him for the first time.
That's wild.
Did his time and was with him at the NFL. That's why I tweeted last week too. Some people were like, with the NFL honors, I said, what an incredible night for Kenny and his family, because even though he had been given or been nominated as the Packers Man of the Year for the Walter Payton Man of the Year Award in 2018, his dad was actually the one that informed him of that while he was incarcerated. Well, this time, him and his mom and his dad were both there in New Orleans when that was all happening. So Kenny also knows some stuff about MMA, so that helps as well. But my first week with the Packers, when I came over from the Press Gazette, was April 25th, 2016. And then it was that Thursday, 4 days later, they drafted Kenny Clark. So him and my story have kind of been intertwined as well. So there's so many great dudes, though, man. I mean, Micah Hyde, J-Ron Elliott, Bo Melton is going to become another one that's currently on. There's so many amazing guys that have been on this team. But if you ask me that question, I don't know if there's any way I can answer it where it's not Mercedes and Kenny.
I think that's I think that's very appropriate. I never got to meet Mercedes, but I've had a lot of interactions with Kenny, and he's always been just a stand-up dude and just so down to earth on everything. One day offline, I might pick your brain on the other side of that.
Yeah.
Because
we can have that conversation if you want.
Yeah, I'm curious. One day offline, we'll talk about that.
It's not a long list, though.
Yeah, I wouldn't think it would be, because Packers generally don't keep that around.
Ted Thompson did a good job for the most part. For the most part, I think Ted Thompson did a really good job. I will say this: there's a lot of things that the character of player, as good as Ted did, when Brian took that role over in 18, I think he's surpassed it. I mean, the quality of guys. And if you're a fan and you listen to like their post-draft interviews with us, or even follow, it doesn't have to be my stories, other people's stories on some of these guys. I mean, there are some really incredible human beings that the Packers have brought in here that I've kind of felt blessed that I've been exposed to kind of meet a little bit.
Mike Daniels mentioned that he thought that the Packers generally don't get enough. I don't know how he put it, like guys with attitudes,
But
if
see,
you will.
that's the thing, though, right? Because like, Mike's also one of my all-time favorites.
Yeah.
Mike had the attitude. Mike
But he
brought.
was like such a character off the field, and so like
the
such
best
a like
player.
a teddy bear off the field.
But he also was a good dude.
Yeah.
Like Mike Daniels, he will never want to hear me say this, but Mike Daniels is one of the biggest, kindest, biggest hearted people out there. He just so happens to also have been a 310-pound defensive tackle that had a chip the size of New Jersey on his shoulder that he
Right.
played with, and that kind of motivated him. But I mean, Mike is when I mention those guys, he's in that same breath. I mean, I've been at pro wrestling. I went to WWE with Mike Daniels. Like, I mean, he is another one of those guys. But to that point, I get that. Like, you want to have some of those dudes that have an edge to them. But like, I think Elton Jenkins has an edge to him, but he's also a fine guy to deal with as far as a person. So
yeah, and I as a fan, I appreciate that about the Packers, because I think you want players that you could root for on and off the field.
Not to interrupt you, but like Malik Willis gets traded for, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about a guy that the Packers did not draft him, he's been in Tennessee for, at that point, was it 2 years? He'd been in Tennessee. And then you see him come here in the way, yes, he did some incredible stuff on the field. Amazing job he did coming in late notice to make basically help the Packers win 3 games. But like the way he carries himself, him and Jordan Love are like the same dude in terms of just their disposition and like their attitude and how they handle themselves and conduct themselves. If you're not doing your homework on these guys, I mean, that goes to the pro personnel staff, that goes to the original scouting reports of them coming out of college. I think the Packers, when it comes to dotting I's and crossing T's on those type of guys, I venture to guess there's not any team in the league that does it better.
And as a fan, I appreciate that. I mean, we knew that about Malik coming from his pro day of taking stuff out of his suitcase to give to someone who needed something on the street there. So stand up dude all around.
Incredible.
Let's see here. Now you've been to a lot of games over your years. If you could go back and rewatch one of those games you've been to for the first time again, and I know you're in the media box, so that might take away from some of it, but if you could go back and rewatch one of those again for the first time, having the same exact feelings, which would you choose and why?
2016 NFC divisional playoff game in Dallas is my all-time favorite game that I've covered. And there's been some good ones the Packers have been on the losing side of, but I mean, in terms of like just the overall jubilation of a victory, that's one of the coolest games. And then you were asking earlier about the features I've written. One of the other ones was with Mason and his sister-in-law, Brittany, who unfortunately passed away with ovarian cancer a number of years ago. And he was wearing the bracelet for her, the teal bracelet, in support of her as he's drilling back to, he's basically in a kickoff there, I think against Dan Bailey, to win that game, 50-plus yarders. And Mason was cool, calm, and collected and got the Packers and pushed them through to get to Atlanta. That was one of the coolest games I've ever been a part of. Certainly, you know, the legend of Jared Cook and how that sort of took on a life of its own. People kind of remember Jared a little bit differently because of how that season ended. The offense really had kind of struggled to click in the first half of the season. Jared wasn't doing a lot in the offense. And then it was right after like that Washington game in November, everything just sort of took off for them. And there were so many cool memories of that run the table. But like to be able to get into the playoffs, dominate, and then obviously get that win over the Dallas, it was one of the coolest games I'd ever experienced. And that, I believe, no, I take that back. That was not because my first game there was actually another very noteworthy game. That was the 26-3 halftime.
Matt Flynn.
When Matt Flynn was there and Eddie Lacy was at the peak of his powers as a running back. And people, for as much as they like to dog on Eddie, I mean, what he put himself through that season, I'll never forget. They don't have Rodgers. Eddie, during the week, is in a boot basically the entire week, like an ankle, like those air casts. And then he's playing every down basically come the playoffs and come the playoff game, but down that stretch to make the playoffs. And so, yeah, I've covered some pretty memorable games at AT&T Stadium. That's probably why that was my answer earlier.
Yeah, you nailed that without a beat, man.
But that 2016 game, like there's so many things that I just think it's a cornucopia of like incredible moments. I mean, I was there in 2013 as well for the Rodgers comeback game, the pass to Cobb. For as bad as the Soldier Field press box is in terms of the media area, we actually ended up having the perfect vantage point for seeing Cobb come open, and then obviously having that catch and them getting to the playoffs after such a long, tumultuous season. There's for as many of the heartbreakers that there are along the way, and there's certainly been plenty of them in the playoffs, but there's a lot of cool moments too that it's like, wow, like somewhere down the line, I'm going to be able to talk about, like, I was there for that. Like I got to experience that and see it in real time.
Is it weird being in the media box because you can't react and you see these things happen?
That's a good question.
I mean, do you ever just like kind of react without realizing it, or are you just so numb to it?
It's weird, man. For a guy that likes pro wrestling and likes UFC, like spontaneous moments, I don't react to things. Like, and you were asking earlier, and I never got back to this about my, taking the fandom out of it and doing it as a job. I don't think there was ever a moment I was more disappointed than how the 2021 divisional playoff game ended against the 49ers. And that, because of how the COVID stuff was happening, I actually had to move myself from the press box area back down to my desk, because at that point, the NFL had reinstituted their COVID policies where we no longer could go to the press conference live anymore. We had to do it all on Zoom again. So I actually had to set myself up. So to give you an example of that, of why you kind of take yourself out of it, I have a job to do. I got to write, right? Like I have to. So if something crazy happens in the game, there might be like a holy crap, like kind of moment, but it's also, okay, well, I got to get our live blog or our game to game updates updated. I have our website people are sending me text to make sure I proof that it's grammatically accurate, factually accurate. There's so many different things happening. It's like any job. Like my dad worked at the paper mill down the street here. When you're doing shutdown on one of the toilet paper machines, you're not focused on everything else that's happening. You're focused on that task in front of you. So
that makes sense. I could see that.
It's really, I think sometimes there's a lot of stuff that'll hit you in a wave when you're done with the story, you're leaving the building. But in the moment, I'm just so locked into
gotta focus on getting the job done. I get that. Yeah, it kind of makes it feel like you're not even watching the event in real time. You're kind of just watching a segment of it and trying to get on with it. So if couple more of these random hypotheticals here. If you could sit down and have a conversation, maybe writing a story on anyone in the history of the Green Bay Packers, alive or dead, I'm taking Vince Lombardi and Curly Lambeau off the table here. Who would be your person that you'd want to have that conversation with?
Cecil Isbell. Cecil Isbell is, some of the people know this in the Packers blogosphere. I am absolutely enamored with his story. I hope to maybe at some point, it's so hard to do historical stuff now because that's Cliff Crystal's lane. And maybe it's something, it may even be when I'm retired. I don't know. But if for people that don't know Cecil Isbell, he was the guy that basically took over as the passer after Arnie Herber retired. And he only played 5 years because the league at that point in time, guys weren't making a lot of money. And it wasn't what it is now in terms of like, okay, well, the season ended, I'll see you next year. Guys became coaches. Guys went into business. Guys created, got their own car dealerships. Like they had to do other things. So his run from 38 to 1942 is one of the most immaculate runs you'll ever see. I mean, the guy held the single season passing touchdowns record for the Packers for 40 years. Wow. He threw 24 touchdown passes, and I believe it was 1942, his last year as the starting quarter. Well, he was a halfback, but he was the passer. He's throwing to Don Hudson, yada, yada, yada. But that helps. His last year, he throws 24 touchdown passes. That went through Tobin Root. That went through Bart Starr. That went through all these eras until Lynn Dickey broke it, I think, in 1983, where he had the 32 touchdowns. Yes, the 32 touchdowns, also had 29 interceptions, but he had 32 touchdowns. That record stood. Yeah. And I've been a big proponent. I'm under no disillusions. I don't think Cecil's ever getting the NFL and the Pro Football Hall of Fame. They don't care about pre-1960 stuff. The Centennial Slate proved that. But so I doubt he's ever going to get in, but his story fascinates me. I love everything about it. I think he passed away in 1985. He's one of those like forgotten heroes of that era. In the 20s, there were plenty of them. The 30s, there were a few of them. But what that run he got, I think he made 4 All-Pro teams, and then obviously, won a world championship as well. So like he's a special guy. And then once he was gone, that's when the magic started to dissipate somewhat from that. Canadeo was around for a few years. Obviously Hudson then, faded into the sunset. And then that era of Packers football kind of came to an end.
I love that answer, man. I shouldn't have even had to specify Lombardi. I should have known that you were going to pull out some obscure player. I love it.
No disrespect to Lombardi, no disrespect to Lambo. There's so many great legends of this place, but it's those type of guys that had such a huge impact. And maybe they would have found somebody after Herbert that could have thrown the ball to Hudson. Maybe that would have happened. But you've heard Bill Belichick has actually made comments about this too. The 1-2 combination of first Herbert, but then Isbell and Hudson. There weren't a lot of people doing that. There was, Sid Luckman came around. There was some guys out there that could throw the ball well and were productive. But you go back, I think one of those years, correct me if I'm wrong, there was one of those seasons where Hudson had a really big offensive year, but I think had a ton of interceptions too, because teams just didn't know how to throw the ball consistently and accurately.
That makes sense.
The Packers found something out there. Lambeau was an innovator, man. His magic eventually ran out there in the late 40s, but when you talk about his tenure in how the league evolved and how he's kept with that, both from the way he built his teams to the way they performed on the field, it's one of the things. I know Cliff gets annoyed with me because I bother him about these type of things, but it's a fascinating thing to see, because at every iteration of this 100+ years of the National Football League, you see those trends and how things change. And that's why, again, I got so punchy with people during this whole Kansas City three-peat. And I understand they were trying to go for the first three-peat of Super Bowl titles. But I really felt like if that got achieved, and if it did, kudos to them, but we would have completely forgotten about everything the Packers achieved, because
that drove me nuts.
What happened now? Yeah. It's not just the NFL. That's so much of our society now. We don't care if we can't see where the river started. We don't care what is around the bend. And that bothers me.
Dude, that drove me bonkers. That everyone was like disrespecting Lombardi's three-peat and Lambeau's three-peat, and man, because it's like, where do you draw the line then?
Yeah.
There's no free agency back in the 80s, so do we discredit the 49ers dynasty?
By the way,
where do you draw the line of what's the real dynasty then? And it's always, the goalpost is always going to change. So drives me nuts.
I didn't end up responding to anybody because, as I was talking to you about, I don't like getting into fights with people on Twitter. But the amount of people, because I tweeted afterwards, I was going to do this, man. I had my mind made up. Win, lose, or draw. Well, win. If the Eagles won, I was doing this. I was going to have a tweet that also included the ad to the NFL. These are your three-peat champions, the National Football League champions. These are the two teams that did it. They're both the Green Bay Packer teams. 29-31, and obviously the run they got on with Lombardi. And I had people who were like, oh, yeah, well, that was, before this, that, and the other thing. And, they had some people mentioning, racial stuff. And it's like, well, you want to go back and look at it. Look at what Vince Lombardi did for race relations. Look at what he did for
it doesn't get talked about.
Doesn't get talked about nearly enough. But they just throw that stuff out there like, well, this was all yada, yada. It's like, no, I mean, he did everything right, man.
Yeah.
Like, if you could score him out in terms of his disposition on matters of football and personal and off the field, on the field,
dude was light years ahead of his time. I mean,
100%.
Just unreal. Yeah, see, that's why everyone needs to follow Wes Hodkiewicz. That content.
And this is what's funny, because everybody's like, well, someday you're going to be the historian. I'm like, I'm not going to be around that long, bro. I'm not going to be around that long. Good Lord willing, if my bank account allows me.
So if people are finding you for the first time through me, which I hope that's not the case, but where could they follow you if they want to learn more?
Dude, I made a joke a couple of years ago. I was like, Instagram was going to be my last social media platform. I was not going to do any more. I will never be on TikTok. You will not find me on TikTok dancing.
I think you could do some good dances, man.
I am not. I will never.
At least offensive line snap. You could probably.
Oh, that would be it. I could do a TikTok where it's just me doing kick slides the entire time.
That could be your dance move. It's just the kick slide over and over again, just different.
I've tried it at weddings. It hasn't really popped off with anybody yet. But no, you can find me at Wes Hod on Twitter, or X now, or whatever it's called this week. I'm also on Instagram at Wes Hod as well. Matt Ramage is the one that gets credit for the Instagram thing. He was the guy that was kicking me to get going more on Instagram.
I'm glad.
I'm not going to create the type of content that you guys do, but I think it has been important to kind of show people what I do behind the scenes a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because it is such an interesting job that I kind of have.
Mm-hmm.
But to get back to my original point about other social media network things. I did get on Threads, so I'm at Wes Hod on Threads, and I'm also on Blue Sky now, which I think is also Wes Hod, but like with all the Blue Sky gimmicks there as well. So funny story about the whole Wes Hod thing, because somebody's like, oh, you've always been called Wes Hod. I've never been called Wes Hod. But what happened was, way back when the Green Bay Press-Gazette forced me and my colleague in the preps department at the time, Scott Vency, to get Twitter accounts in October of 2009, at that point, every character mattered. It didn't matter if it was in your actual Twitter handle or anywhere else. Well, I got a long freaking last name. So Weston Hodkiewicz did not stand very well on Twitter. You basically could say hi to me if you wanted to respond to me.
That's all 140 characters right there.
So I switched it down to Wes Hodkiewicz, and then eventually I just went down to Wes Hod, and then it's been that way for the last 15 years. So
that makes sense.
People don't have to actually pronounce or spell or anything my last name. It's at Wes Hod pretty much everywhere.
And maybe I can always take this out if you don't want this in, but I also know that you are rocking the LinkedIn game. I am not connected with you.
Yes, I'm on LinkedIn now.
Dude, I am not connected with you. I don't use a ton of LinkedIn.
Yeah.
But every once in a while I'll go on there like once a week or whatever, and I'll see someone that I'm connected with that likes one of your things. I hate LinkedIn with a passion.
Yes.
But you bring light where it is dark in LinkedIn.
I got to get back on it because I've been slacking the last month. So here's the story quickly with the LinkedIn thing. I lost access to my LinkedIn for almost 9 years. The entire time I've been at the Green Bay Packers, I have not had access to my LinkedIn account. You might ask me why. Because for whatever stupid reason, when I got a LinkedIn account, I used my Green Bay Press-Gazette email, which is no longer active. And there was no way for the longest time for me to get access to my account again until they started doing the thing where you show your license, you show your ID, and you can backdoor it to get control of your account again. It was 8 years and 8 months off of LinkedIn. Dude, the messages that I had for 8.5, it was like, it honestly is the closest thing I've come across to like having like a time capsule. And it was just wild to go through. So when I got on there, again, I didn't use it. Fortunately, thankfully, like I don't want to be too much of a curmudgeon or too much of a jerk about this, because there are people, we have interns right now that are beholden to it. They're trying to find jobs and opportunities, no different than I did. So I will never crap on it. But there's people that are like me that have held jobs for like 8-9 years in the same position. And it's like, what is the point of this? It's like, hey, look, I did this and I did this. So my LinkedIn just ended up turning into me basically making fun of all that stuff.
Dude, and I love that so much because I am not a LinkedIn fan. And there's a time and place for LinkedIn. You know, people, like you said, need to use it for networking, but
100%.
The stuff you're posting there just...
Well, and me and my boss have a very special relationship. Duke Bobber, who would hate me if I mentioned his name right now, but I'm doing it anyway. He's the guy who hired me. I am his ward. That is his fault that I'm here. And he has a very cool personality, very fun sense of humor. And him and I go back and forth. Like we give it just back and forth to each other constantly, grief and whatnot. And then I started being like, hey, you're going to say some of this stuff? I'm going to put it on LinkedIn. This is what my boss thinks of me. He thinks I'm the most unprofessional person on LinkedIn. I'm going to take a really smug shot of myself and put it on LinkedIn. And that's what I did.
And I bet the amount of interaction you get is just insane because of it. People like seeing that on LinkedIn.
I get more comments on my LinkedIn page than I think anything else. And by the way, I do have a big post that I have to get out there on LinkedIn. I'll probably do it next week.
Okay.
Because my boss spent the entire 2024 season taking screenshots of me from various videos on Packers.com. And he started it with, this was like literally week 1 of the season, Wes looking smug. And it was like 40 photos of me screenshotted of me like with like a smug look on my face. I got to put that on. I was going to do a whole gallery and put, this is what my boss thinks of me.
And that is the one and only Wes Hodkiewicz. Huge thank you to Wes for taking the time to talk with me, share his story. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. I also want to say thank you to Nicolay Law for sponsoring this show. Without them, we wouldn't be able to do a lot of the fun stuff we do. So thank you to Nicolay Law. If you are injured, get Nicolay. If you want to be on an episode of Tales from the Tundra, check out the show notes or the comments to find that link on how to submit your form to join the show. And once again, my name is Ben. I hope to see you guys same place, same time next week. And until then, go Pack Go. Thank you so much for watching and all of your support. It means the world to me. So we will see you next week.